sort of came up with the idea of BET based on, early on there had been a lot of efforts by African Americans to use cable as a way of providing targeted programming. That was one of the promises of cable, that it would create more diversity, create hundreds of channels, which it has done. But at that time, it was fairly difficult to create that number of channels because of, one, government relations, two, cost of capital, and three, the limited penetration of cable in urban markets. So cable was pretty much, during its early years, pay TV and retransmission of broadcast signals, and also replaying of old broadcast programs or other program that was produced that was not, that didn't have broad mass appeal. So when I decided to start BET, it was really based on the idea that the time was right for a African American oriented program as cable was beginning to make its inroads into urban markets.
Now at that time, what kind of programming was available to African American viewers?
Basically, whatever was on the networks. There were very few shows that were clearly targeted or designed to appeal to African Americans. Yeah, the Soul Train was on television. That was probably one that was most directed to African Americans. But the others were shows that were on television, you know, The Jeffersons, Sanford and Son, and the like, syndicated comedies, very few dramas. Very little coverage of black colleges, football, basketball, very little coverage of black actors or black entertainers, music artists, and almost no coverage of black news, public affairs, political activities.
And how did you go about starting it?
Well, it was pretty much, again, sort of luck in that I was a lobbyist for the industry, and I happened to meet this young guy who was trying to start a channel aimed at the elderly. And he asked me to escort him up on Capitol Hill to go to a particular committee, a committee on aging it was called, to try to get the endorsement from the congressman, a congressman by the name of Claude Pepper from Florida, who was head of this select committee on aging. And he wanted the congressman to endorse his program idea, figuring it would help him get more support from the cable operators and perhaps even help him raise money. When I looked at his business plan, he had a plan that focused on elderly as a target market. And so I said, gee, can I borrow your business plan? He said, sure. So wherever he had elderly, I just crossed it out and put black. And we just sort of just mapped over his strategy and laid over on that another demographic, African Americans who had particular buying power, African Americans who were not properly depicted on television, African Americans who were concentrated in certain markets, and so on and so forth. So using that model, I then sort of went out and borrowed $15,000 from the Bank of Washington, that was at that time, it's no longer here, and took the idea to John Malone and asked him if he would be interested in being an investor. Well, the first broadcast was simply a movie. You know, you had 2 hours, you could take a 2-hour movie. And we picked a movie called A Visit to a Chief's Son. It was a movie about an a white kid who goes on a sort of photo safari with his father, meets an African kid, a son of an African tribal chieftain, and they sort of get to know one another while his father is in Africa. And it was sort of a perfectly politically correct movie at that time to present to cable operators, because again, most of the subscribers were in rural areas, and most of your cable operators didn't understand urban markets, and so you wanted to put something on in this business that wouldn't intimidate anybody, wouldn't create any kind of issue about what, quote, black entertainment was. And so that was the first show that went on the air.